Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. Andi Sudler, how's it going this evening?
It is going just fine. How are you?
Good. Now, it's funny, before the show, you mentioned a beer name, and I just happened to have that. So, Dragon's Milk, which I had on the 151, 152 episodes, I just went and bought some more. I know the place in town that has it the cheapest, so that's where you go. Got to know your local booze shops, right?
Absolutely. That's the way to go. You got to know where you can get it and who can get it free the cheapest.
Yeah, we're going to start with a different tack than usual. Generally, we're talking about religion on the show, but whatever. Let's talk beer. So, do you remember the first beer that you ever tasted?
Oh, yeah. Um Unfortunately, I do. PBR. That was yeah, the go-to in my hometown. Everybody had it and it was the cheap, you know, it was around.
Yeah,
So,
there was an era where I think price was like the key to beer.
yeah, I think
And
that probably was the early 80s.
but I had like an uncle who would drink the beer in Pittsburgh. I feel like every city, like they had two or three like nationwide beers and like the one local beer. So Iron City was like Pittsburgh's beer. So my uncle would drink it and he'd like give me the bottle, take a drink out of it. And I swear I was probably like 3 at the time. So anytime you ask me if I'm intellectually or emotionally stunted, I'm just going to say that's the cause right there. But my nephew was around. He's going to college and they were talking about drinking, of course, because that's what happens. And they said, "Oh, well, Uncle Zach, he didn't drink till he was out of college." And that was like I was like a late bloomer when it come to beer. I don't know, when did you discover that, hey, I like this, and oh, I like the good stuff?
um well, when I decided that I liked the good stuff was very late in life. But as far as liking beer, that just came with the territory. I was a country girl. We didn't have any of the real special beers growing up. It was Coors and Bud and Michelob, and it was all cans, you know. You got lucky if you got a Coors long neck. So it's always been beer and it's always been cheap beer. And probably since I was about 16, because country bonfires and beer was just the way our Saturday nights went back home.
Yeah, and there's also like the maybe the local cheap version. There was a beer when I went to college in Missouri called Rhinelander, and you could get like a case for like $5. I mean, this was in the early '90s, but yeah, it really was like number one consideration back then was price.
Mm-hmm. That's about what PBR was for us. You know, you could get it bottom of the barrel. You can get a 30 pack for like $10. Everybody chipping a little bit out of the ashtray, and you have a good Saturday night.
Definitely. So are you still in the area you grew up in? So are you talking about living in, I think it's Virginia?
No, I grew up on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I
Okay.
now live in North Jersey, so not too far.
Okay. Yeah, Jersey's different. People always think of Jersey as like just a big suburb of New York City, and it's a pretty long state.
You would be surprised. Jersey has lots of farmland, lots of very country rural areas, and lots of very country rural people. Once you get past about the first 45 minutes around New York, right around that very suburb area, it's all very hick and hillbilly. So,
See you in the hillbilly area.
kind of, you know, just like they talk about Pennsylvania, they say that besides Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, the rest of it's considered Pennsyltucky. You know, Jersey kind of blends right in with the rest of it. It's all pretty much country.
Yeah, that might have to do with the entire country. Uh, For me, two of the gateway beers, two beers that I liked were Bass and Newcastle. So British beers. I mean, the whole craft beer scene was barely anything in the mid to late 90s. What were some of those for you?
Um, for me, when you start talking about craft beers, I mean, the first one that comes to mind was Dogfish Head. I was Maryland, and that was the shoreline in Delaware. That was Seaford. That was less than an hour from my hometown. So that was the first specialty beer that I really knew about.
And Dogfish
And
Head's been around for a while, right? Like, isn't
yeah.
it like 30 years old? I mean, it's
hmm And so
yeah.
when you talk about like the new beers and the craft beers, that was the first craft beer that I kind of learned about, and it kind of grew from there. But their first beer that I ever tried was the 90-minute IPA. It was not a did not sell itself well. So
Yeah, I think a Dogfish Head. It's the Sea Quench that I like, which is like the lime sour, but it's like three different kinds of lime
yeah,
sour beers. And then there's like, well, everybody talks about the 120-minute IPA, and I don't think when you think IPAs, do you think like how high alcohol? But I think that one is, and it's hard to get. But it seems like it's one of those beers that people have, and they say, "Well, I had that experience. I don't want to do it again."
yeah.
I
I'm
don't
not.
know. I don't know about that with, well, I guess with beer, it's like when you're trying new stuff, you're like, okay. And then you go, okay, that style, maybe not for me.
Yeah, I'm not an IPA fan. I've learned that in trying the craft beers. I mean, Jersey has an amazing craft beer selection. We probably have one of the highest number of craft breweries in the country to be one of the smallest states. But we have so many options. But I've learned that I like just about every other type of beer there is, but I just don't do IPAs.
Yeah, I was wondering. So I was listening to a fantasy football podcast, and they were saying how much they didn't like IPAs, but then they were more like, well, when it comes to beer, it's like price. And I'm like, oh, so you don't really like beer? Like, I really wondered, like, for a lot of people who drink beer, if it's just, well, it's cheap and it gets me drunk or gets me a buzz. Because I just wonder, like, how many people, like my cousin and my uncle, they still drink Bud Light. And I'm like, you've
Oh,
never enjoyed the taste of that, right?
no,
Like,
that's like
it's
horse
just what you
piss.
do to pass the time.
Yeah. No, like I enjoy creative beers. I really do like beer. I like smoked stouts and porters, and I like the different types of Hefeweizens and your sours and your saisons. I actually really do enjoy beer. I actually brew my own at this point because
Oh.
I enjoy beer. I enjoy the different taste and the notes and playing with the different hops, but there's just something about the bitters and IPAs I just can't get past.
Yeah, there's a definite bitter is expected with
Yeah.
beer. And even some, I think that's why I'm more of a barrel aged stout, just because it's a little more smooth for the higher alcohol content. Like
Yeah.
some stouts that I have, there's the flavor of like if licorice is a pronounced flavor in that, I just can't do it. It's just not for me. That was the problem with that local stout I got. I was like, oh, it's a local barrel aged stout. Let me try that compared to Dragon's Milk. No, not
Yeah.
not really my thing. But do you have, if there was like a number one draft pick beer, is there one you would select?
Um for me right now, my go-to is the Kona Wave. It's just a ale. I find it like a really nice summer lawnmower beer. I think it's called the Kona Blue Wave.
So
And
you go
it's
for Hawaiian beer. Nice.
yeah, and it's a really nice, light, smooth. And it's been my go-to for the summer. Very refreshing and just very easy drinking. Um, but I personally do like the Weibacher Sunday morning stout. I know not everybody has that coffee love, but I'm a big coffee drinker too. I'm very snotty when it comes to my coffee. So, I like the flavors very pronounced. So the Sunday morning stout is one of my go-tos for my winter beer.
Yeah, maybe I'm like an opposite because I mean, I have like a fridge and a closet right over there full of sours that I do drink, and there are a bunch of great local and national options available. But it's like for some reason, I have friends who are like, well, after it's almost like I don't wear white after Labor Day kind of thing. Like, well, after a certain day, I don't drink barrel aged stouts. I'm like, well, I still like them. I mean, it's not like I don't have heating in my house and I need to drink a high booze beer to stay warm at night. I just like the taste of them. But it does seem, yeah, I do go with the sours. It's like in my fridge, I have like a coconut sour, I have a pineapple sour, I have a blueberry, I have cherry, I have lime. It's like every flavor is out there, which is great.
And see, I love the sours. I really do enjoy them. I mean, if you get a good one and you get where the fruit flavors are really pronounced, not just the sour, so it doesn't just taste like Sour Patch Kids. I really like them, but I'm a big coffee drinker. I like my coffee. I like my iced coffee, and I like my hot coffee. I'll drink hot coffee in 90-degree weather. So for me, coffee beer is just an automatic kind of go-to.
Yeah, that was the weird thing last year with Bourbon County Stout is one of the most coveted beers that comes out every year. And even though the company did sell out to InBev, which is like this international beer conglomerate that's buying up all these great small breweries.
Well, drama keeps going.
Not really small, but this beer comes out. It's like Black Friday. You get in line and you get the beer. Well, I came back from a trip to Mexico and I went and last year, the only version they had was the coffee. And they also had like the Northwoods, which was like this almond version, but it was like 50% more expensive. So now I have 4 of the coffees in my closet, but I'm like, I'm going to need to trade that with somebody because I don't know if I feel like it's going to be wasted on me. Like I know you probably had this experience, like you like going to a beer store where they sell singles. So I got one of the Sunday morning stouts and remembered us talking about that ReasonCon last year and had it and said, wow, that's a lot of coffee. If you like coffee, like seriously, it's like, I know if you like coffee, you're going to enjoy this beer. And that wasn't for me, but that's not like the end of the world. I kind of like it that my tastes might be a little bit narrowed because if I was into IPAs, I don't know what I'd do because there's 7 billion of them.
Yeah, like I love that there is an actual store about 25 minutes from me that's all they sell. They are just shelves and shelves. They're coolers and coolers full. They break down the 6-packs and the 4-packs, and they're just singles. And the whole store is just mix of 6. And so that's all you do. So you can walk in and you can buy singles, you can buy mixed 6s of everything. Nothing is a 4-pack, nothing is a solid 6-pack. So you can go in and buy individuals of everything. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than buying a 4-pack or a 6-pack or like a bomber of a beer and tasting it and going, what happened? Like there's a beer called Wandering Blues. It's a local brewery, Orpheus, and I've had it the last 2 years. And it's a blueberry sour. It was great, and I had this year's version, and it had this like vinegary flavor. And I was like, crap! Now I have 5 of them left. I need to find some. But the best part about beer community is there are all these Facebook local groups where people kind of chat and let you know what's coming out or talk about stuff. So I'm sure I could make a trade now. Now you have done the ultimate beer experience. You have actually muled beer to people. I think we already talked about the beer that you did, but how did this all come about?
Well, I mean, when you have a certain love of people And those people love beer. You have to do what you have to do, you know? And since then, I've sent them much more. But, we were heading for ReasonCon, which, of course, everybody knows you've talked of ReasonCon for ages now, but waiting for Wrath, the awesome crew there, Jen, Aaron, Shay, and Steve, always looking for new and creative beers. I wanted to share with them my favorite, which is the Sunday Morning Stout. And it is a Pennsylvania brewery, and right across the bridge from me, actually. It's about a 10-minute drive from me, the Weibacher Brewery is. And so I figured it best to just go pick some up from the brewery directly and drive it to North Carolina when I got to meet them. So,
yeah, Weyerbacher's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
At least they get prominent shelf space even in Georgia.
Well, up and down the East Coast, they tend to be pretty well known. It gets harder to find once you cross the Mississippi. So I figured it'd be fun to give them something that I knew they might not be able to find in Wyoming.
Yeah, it's the thing about beer, like as you mentioned, I mean, in the state, I think it's in the state of Georgia, it might be in the Atlanta area, there's like 45 breweries now. So you can get just about anything, but there are beers that are available in other parts of the country that you can't get. And it's a little dubious legally to actually ship beer, but I've done it before. And I've sent beer. I sent beer to the guest who was the pastor, and he sent me the Bourbon County Rare, which I've kind of saving. I probably drink it if I have him back on the show. But it's like that's not a beer that's available in Georgia. You can only get it in like the Chicago area. So it's like cool, Even the shipping beer is not cheap. I'll just say that.
No, it's not. I sent them some other interesting beers that I've found over here in my travels, especially with these smaller New Jersey breweries. They've come up with some creative ones. I just found a newer one that I would love to send out to them if I could get a hold of some cans. One of our breweries makes a funnel cake nitro.
Huh.
So, yeah, it's definitely a different taste. And so I'd like to see what their thoughts on it are. So.
Yeah, when you get a beer and you're like, I've seen everything. I think that I saw a beer is like out of North Carolina that had catnip in it. And I'm like, okay, that's reaching, but it's pretty much anything you can think of. It's probably in beer.
Like, I don't know. I mean, catnip, and once you start going outside of things that humans eat, you start reaching your limits. I don't want dog food in my beer. There's some things.
Well, let's continue on the whole ReasonCon. So I don't remember if that was your first kind of atheist conference. Like what?
Yes, it was.
You decided to go. You didn't go as far as the Waiting for Wrath crew, but you did travel pretty far to get there. What made you decide this is the place I need to be?
Well, it was my first atheist conference, but it had been talked up and talked about, and I listened to and heard so many of my podcasts that I've listened to over the years talk about it, and everybody was so excited. And what I really wanted was to get the opportunity to meet all of these people that I had spent the last couple of years listening to, even if it was just for a moment. And knowing that of all places, North Carolina was relatively close. It was in my realm, it's within driving distance. Anything within 2 days is within driving distance for me. I'll drive anywhere. So it was something that I thought was definitely feasible. And it gave me the opportunity to be around people that I felt like were understanding. I didn't feel like I needed to put on airs, and I didn't need to be someone else. And that was a big goal for me. And just to have the opportunity to be in a place where I could be me for a little bit. So I was excited to make that trip.
Well, did it live up to that hype?
I think it did. I think it did in all ways, and much more so than I ever expected it to. I mean, it was great to get to meet everybody and to get to put faces to all the voices. You know, you see pictures on occasion. A lot of the podcasters have Facebook pages or Twitter pages, and you get to see the pictures, but to actually get to meet everybody, and you guys are all so accessible, you know, you get to hang out and realize that everybody's just real people and they all just want to be normal, and it was really, really cool. So
Yeah, there's definitely getting a little feedback. There he goes. There's definitely that thing of the very popular, like the Scathing Atheist Crew or Cognitive Dissonance, where you see a bunch of people coming up to them and you're like, oh, but these are people who just are civilians. They don't usually get people coming to them on the street saying, hey, you do this podcast. So for a weekend, it's very weird because they probably are like, what is this whole thing? But I got to talk to Noah about the Jacksonville Jaguar, like talk about football and stuff. That never come up on his show, you know, that kind of thing.
yeah,
And it was cool to get to chat
yeah.
with the people. Uh-oh. There you are, I think.
I'm sure for them that, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they get to live their celebrity, and that can be very interesting for them. I mean, who doesn't want to be famous for a day, right? But it definitely, it was a blast to just be in a space with a bunch of other people who knew who you were, and not necessarily knowing your name, but they knew that they were like you. So you didn't have to put on airs, you know? There were no pretenses. Everybody was there for the. It was great.
Yeah, there's this occasion where you might run into somebody who's religious and you're like, oh no, they're going to ask me something that I don't know. Or like there's a secret handshake involved. Or, oh no, everybody's kneeling all of a sudden. What happened there? You know, that kind of thing. And it's definitely relaxing. But you also brought your son with you. What was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not a baby, so you know, he was 17. Jeez. But you know, he was always has been very open about his non-belief, and for him, I just wanted the same thing. I wanted him to be in a situation where he felt and knew that there were people like him, and that he also could be in a space where he didn't have to put on airs and there were no pretenses, that he could just be himself. And it was nice because he just enjoyed himself, you know, got to be just a normal teenager.
Well, how did that go growing up? Like, did you say at a certain point, hey, I don't believe, and leave it up, or how did it go?
Actually, I never said anything to either one of my kids. My boys now are 16 and 20. And I never actually mentioned it to them growing up. They just, it kind of slowly worked its way out in conversation. I guess they were talking about fairy tales one day, and the conversation came out, well, of course we don't believe in fairy tales. We don't believe in, you know, the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. We don't believe in God. And it was just, there was no pretense to it, and they said it just as dismissively as they would have said, You know, a 16-year-old would say, no, I don't believe in Santa Claus. I didn't know what to say besides, oh, okay. So, you know, I didn't really say anything besides, all right, do you have anything else you want to add to that? And they were just like, nope. They were like, why would we? It doesn't make any sense. There's no proof. There's no Santa. There's no Easter Bunny. It's like, alrighty then. I'm sure my grandparents would flip if they ever found that out, but
yeah. Well, I mean, what is that family background? Were you kind of brought up in a religious?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Oh yes. United Methodist. Very, very much so. I was went to church every Sunday until I was 14, and only then because I had to work. You know, I got a job and couldn't, so that was my reasoning for not going. When my kids got older and I wasn't working on Sundays, then we were back to church, even though at that point I didn't believe. There really wasn't a discussion made. There was no talking about it. As long as I was living in the house, there wasn't anything to really be said until I moved out and lived on my own. And so my grandparents still don't know that we don't believe and aren't believers. It's just not something we discuss. I'm sure they have some questions because my kids and I don't attend any church and haven't in years, but they won't ask any questions. I'm sure they just don't want to know any answers.
That does seem to be an older relative default. It's like, well, you can't even start to have that conversation. Was it really rooted in your family and kind of culture that to be a believer was just kind of part of it when you were growing up?
Yeah. I mean, for everyone else in my family, they all still are. All the aunts, all the cousins, everyone else, everybody else just is. You know, they're all still very regular church going members.
Are you open about being an atheist with any of them?
Some of them know, mainly my younger relatives. Basically everyone, most of them under 50. The under 50 crowd pretty much knows.
And do you have like debates with them, or do you kind of just, hey, this is what I am and deal with it as you may?
It's more of the deal with it as you may. They don't want to speak on it. They're less likely to debate me on it because the few conversations we've had in that direction, I tend to get in, you know, I tend to ask the questions pretty deeply and you know, I'll just start probing. You know, the questions that made me question at 13 are general questions. They're common sense questions, which I'm sure you and just about anybody else who's ever had a question about religion would have asked. And most of them probably had the same questions and probably got the same answers from our religious pastors and deacons, which was, you just have to have faith. You know, that was the go-to answer for everyone. And it didn't sit well with me. So, you know, when I start asking questions, they don't like to answer me, and they don't like to have those conversations with me because they know there aren't answers. So they know, they just won't talk to me about it anymore. They won't even have around me about it. They try to avoid it because I guess they fear that I'll ask too many questions.
Yeah, that's true. I was thinking, in terms of just being an American, there's an assumption that you're a Christian. But
Yeah.
if you're Black in America, it's not even an assumption.
And for the most part, that's what I find, not just family, but friends and just people in general, people that I work with, people that I just run into on a regular basis. You get on the train or you walk into a store and people automatically assume they'll ask me, you know, what church do I go to? Or they'll ask me to pray with them. If something happens, it's just a very general thing. And especially the older Black people in general, it's just, they assume that I am Black, so I am Christian. And for that, I should be. So why not?
Well, this is something I've thought in terms of women in religion. Like, it's generally, man, women don't get treated very well by Abrahamic religions. Why would they be there? And then it's like, well, how are they treated outside of them? Not so well either. Do you feel in like atheist circles, and I don't know maybe if ReasonCon is a good example, but like just being with other atheists, do you feel accepted, and do you feel there's any blocks there?
I think generally, within atheist circles, women are treated pretty well. I mean, unfortunately, there's always some in every bunch, there's a bad apple or two. But for the most part, I find that there's not, there's a lot more critical thinking to the atheist circles, which it just tends to open up more of the visual of women being more equal. So they tend to be treated a little better. I guess, at least the ones that I've dealt with. I guess, and maybe I've been lucky. I'm not sure if that's the way for everyone, but the women, as far as women go, yes. Now, I can't say I feel the same way on all levels, but you know,
Do you attend like local atheist groups in your area?
I do. The Philadelphia Atheist Humanist group is pretty big, and the Lehigh Valley Humanist group here. I'm closer to Pennsylvania than I am to New Jersey, so I'm much more active in the Pennsylvania groups, which is a bit of a blessing and a curse because Pennsylvania tends to be a little more, I guess you would say, people expect Pennsylvania to be a little more backwoods, but you find them to be a little more open and a little more thinking than you would expect them to be.
Well, I mean, you have to find. I know I went to a few atheist groups locally before I found one that I liked, even though I kind of stopped going. That's why I do the show. So I'm like, hey, I can interact with people. Yay. Now you've recently taken like a cross country trip. What was that all about? And was there good beer?
Of course, there was good beer. I would never go anywhere without good beer. I went on a cross country trip sponsored by Mini USA called Mini Takes the States. And basically, they put on a trip that about 1,000 Mini Coopers posted up and drove around the United States. We split the group into two groups, started from Orlando, Florida, and Portland, Oregon, and met in the middle in Keystone, Colorado. Starting from the east, we did Tallahassee, Florida. Tallahassee actually, for a small city, has some really great tap rooms and a couple of really nice breweries. They have most of their breweries are outside of town, and I'm surprised about that considering that they are a university city, you know. They're downtown college city, but all of their breweries are outside of town.
Hmm.
But, you know, we did Tallahassee, Florida, New Orleans, Little Rock, Arkansas, Dallas, Texas, Oklahoma City, Dodge City, Kansas, and Keystone, Colorado. And I have to tell you, best beer I had was Dodge City, Kansas. You would think in a city that's only about 7 square miles wide, you might not find a whole lot, but the Dodge City Brewery was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the fact that there's so many. Anytime I talk to a guest who's like a beer person, it's like, well, wherever you are, there are a bunch of options, which is great because
Yeah.
certain breweries are known. Some do like old style, like I've heard like the new hot thing in beer is just like, well, just do a regular version of a beer, not like a crazy 17 ingredient thing. And you know, places are known for IPAs or places are known for sours, and you just
And so
know.
the Dodge City Brewery is one of it. Like the entire city is kind of like an old Western city. So everything is kind of kept old style. So even their beers are, even though they have like all of your ales and whatnot, it's kept pretty low key. So you get lots of good classic options, and the beers are just really good. So if you're ever in Kansas, not sure, not sure why, but if you're ever in Kansas, swing through Dodge City and have a beer.
Be good to just go to every state and go to a brewery. I mean, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Well, that was kind of my job in the group.
Well, took that well. They chose well.
Yeah, I was enlisted to pick out 2 or 3 breweries per state, and we had a stop on the way to every night stop, and then at least one at every, you know, after dinner at every night stop for us to go to. So we got to stop and have good beer, local beer at every state. So
Now, when you're traveling across country, were you driving yourself and did you listen to a ton of like podcasts or audiobooks?
yes, driving myself, you know, Mini Coopers, there's not a whole lot of room. So you don't have a whole lot of space. But and of course, podcasts. But since I try and keep up to date with them, what I ended up doing was the entire month before, I did not listen to any of my fun secular friends. And I backlogged all of my podcasts, all of my cognitive dissonance, my scathing atheist, my waiting for wrath, and everything I could backlog so that I had as much saved up as possible so that I could ride and listen. And I had something to keep me company.
But when you listen, did you just like binge listen to one show or did you kind of like go through them, you know, one show at a time, one episode at a time?
No, I sorted them by date because so many of them do like current events. I didn't want to get out of order and find out about something that had happened or
That's true. They do cover.
get too far ahead.
Sometimes you do get, oh, this story comes out, religious story. It's going to be on every show this week. Okay.
Yeah, so I sorted them all by date. That way I could, you know, if there was something going on with Pat Robertson, I wanted to make sure I got it from everybody all at once. And
Right. Well, the news this week, for some reason, our president likes to start new things that have the word force in them. So this week we have a religious task force. How do you think that's going to go for non-believers?
I think it's time for me to leave the country. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I did interview a friend of mine who moved to Uruguay a few years ago, and I feel like, wow, you were a trendsetter right there because,
Yeah.
you know, when I talked to Deb beyond the trailer park, it's like she lives in Canada, all these Canadians, like, you guys have room on your couch? Because There's going to be a
Yeah,
flood of Americans, and forget people coming from Mexico to the U.S. I think north, especially
yeah.
with climate
Un-
change. Let's go north. That's no problem.
Unfortunately, I think that if we don't do something soon, we're going to have a problem. I don't even think it's him. I really don't see this as being him. Uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just don't see him being smart enough to do this. He doesn't seem to be this intelligent. This is all Mike Pence's work, if you ask me.
Yeah, there's a lot of well, as he was running, the people who kind of stuck with him were like, okay, we're just going to cash in as long as we can. You see how many people leave? And they're like writing books and then they become beloved, even though they're like, you worked for this guy. Are you serious?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's every day. The news is just like, wait, did that really happen? I mean, the transition from, oh, it didn't happen to, well, it's not a crime to,
And
well, we don't care if it's a crime. I mean, that's more important. Like, people don't care. It's okay. Good to
and
know.
and I can't fathom how they can look at what's happening and not be concerned with it. They've really just said, "Oh, it's okay," They're comfortable with what he's doing as long as they get in what they need. As long as he passes their law and as long as he passes whatever whatever rule or bill that they need taken care of, they're fine. So,
Yeah, I noticed the whole Russian thing. It was like, after the first day, it was like, wow, I'm shocked. And 2 days later, they're like, well, how many more things? Like, they want to get that Supreme Court pick. And I really think if impeachment happens, and by the way, we've impeached presidents, we've never actually successfully gotten them out of office. That's hard to do. It takes 2/3 majority. It's going to be really hard to do. It's either going to be like a barely not pass or like 100-0,
I think
especially if they're like, as you said, like, well, Pence is going to be in charge, which is a nice,
I
dead
almost
man
wonder,
switch.
yeah, I almost wonder if Mueller's not just waiting until after November to, like, it almost seems to me like he's holding out to see if maybe he'll get the toe tag impeachment and get him out of office. Because if he gets enough people, gets enough Democrats in office, then maybe he'll be able to pull him out. I don't know. I can't even begin to imagine what he's actually thinking just watching what's happening.
Yeah, the whole thing that's scary is, I mean, Watergate took years to prosecute, and it was like one thing that happened. And this is so much. This is like basically the Russian mob taking over America. That's what's happened. Well, it took over Russia first, and then it took over America. But where you live in New Jersey, what is the political? Is there like chances to like flip? Because I'm in a district that almost went Democrat and then didn't and might this time.
Well,
How does it look for the 2018 midterms where you are?
senatorially, we are blue.
Woohoo.
Uh, so it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just we don't have a lot of really good options is our problem. Our running official has been in for a long time and he's not doing anything. He's been sitting on his haunches and he's comfortable where he's at and he doesn't have to do anything. And he doesn't have anybody running against him. There's no challenge. And I'm almost concerned that that'll be enough for them to let a Republican take it because they feel as though he's been there all this time. They're not going to have to worry about whether or not he's going to get pushed out.
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, before the election happened, people were talking about, oh, it's the end of the Republican Party because they let Trump, but because he won, it's like the dead body is still moving around. But I feel like both parties, it's like, you got to get new people in. You got to get new ideas in because it does seem like the Democratic Party kind of lost its way a bit. Like Obama won, and then there was all this backlash, and they didn't seem to do anything. So I'm not feeling very excited. It's like, if you win, where are we going to actually see change? That's a thing I wonder about.
Yeah, I look at what we have available, you know, as far as our candidates who are running, and I see a lot of the same of what they've been arguing against for a long time. It's a lot of stagnation. It's a lot of just stair step candidacy coming out of, you know, the lower level and going into the next level candidacy. People that have been in politics for years, the same things that people said they didn't want, and that's all that the Democrats are putting up. They're not looking for new blood, and I don't see I don't see them getting the support that they think they have.
Yeah, the enthusiasm hasn't come together yet. And at the end, I tend to say, "Hey, guest, do you have a joke?" And I hear that you don't. So if you don't have a joke, is there a brewery in the United States that you want to visit that you haven't? Put that out there.
Oh wow. Left Hand in Colorado.
Okay.
I love their nitro stout, the vanilla one, the chocolate one, their standard nitro, all of them. I want to just go and sit under the tap and just let it pour over my head.
Okay. And that was the thing. Like, I was in Asheville last month, and before I'd never gone. All these breweries are there, and I'm like, so next year ReasonCon is in theory happening. I believe it is happening. If it does happen, are you going to be there?
Absolutely.
And can we get you to like Asheville for a day beforehand? Because there's some good places to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. That sounds like a win-win right there. And you don't, you're just a civilian out there. You don't have one of them podcast blog things. Is there any place you want to direct people, or anything that I didn't ask you want to talk about tonight?
Nope. I'm just one of them innocent old folks out here. I don't think I have anything for anybody to look at of any interest.
Well, thanks for being on tonight. I'm glad we got to chat, because we got to hang out a bit at ReasonCon. We haven't talked that much since. I'm glad you got to kind of recharge and take a trip across the country. And yeah, I hope all the local groups work out, and definitely looking forward to ReasonCon next year.
It was great talking to you. Thanks.
So thank you, Andi, for being on the show tonight.
I loved it. Thank you.
Perfect.